Hey, Cookies here. We are going to be setting up Bigwigs for all of the dungeons throughout Dragonflight, and we're going to start with Algeth'ar Academy. So we're going to go ahead and open up our Bigwig settings by typing /WB in game. You also will need to download Littlewigs. It's like a sister add-on for Bigwigs that allows us to see dungeon encounters and have specific setups and stuff for dungeons. So get Bigwigs and Littlewigs, and then you go in game, type /WB, head over to the Dungeon Bosses tab up at the top, and then go to Dragonflight, Algeth'ar Academy. All right, now, essential setup tips. You don't have to follow exactly what I'm doing. This is my setup process. This is my own personal, setup and what works for me. Things may work differently for you, but this is how I do it. So feel free to follow along. You can copy it if you want, if you feel like it's going to be beneficial for you, but I have really advised you to think for your own personal benefit of what is going to help you, what kind of alerts you need help on, things like that. So the absolute essentials is identify and create sounds for specific situations. The ones that I use specifically are going to be things like whenever I have a dangerous debuff on myself, I will use a specific sound all the time whenever there's a dangerous debuff, so that I know whenever I hear that sound, I have a dangerous debuff, rather than using the default settings where you can't really differentiate a dangerous debuff versus just a debuff that's getting put on you a lot of the time with the default setup on Bigwigs. Another thing is like things to dispel. If there's a lot of bosses and packs in Dragonflight where they'll apply a dispellable debuff to someone, and if you don't dispel it within like 1 or 2 seconds, they probably are dead. So having some kind of alert, at least for me personally, to know that that dispel is going out right then and I need to dispel it immediately, having some kind of notification that tells me that will help a lot. And then lastly, I always try to find one important ability on every single boss encounter to set up a countdown time for. You don't want to set up more than one countdown timer, and this is because the countdown timers can overlap. Sorry. But basically, you'll want to try to find one to set a countdown timer for, because it's just another thing where you're going to have it to where you're going to train your brain to hear that countdown timer and then go, oh, this specific thing is happening and I know it's happening because we've set it up that way. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into it. We'll start with Vexamus. So Vexamus, right off the bat, there are a few things. So there are, like I said, there's a dangerous debuff that goes on yourself. So we want to know when we get that. That's mana bombs. So I'm just going to go to mana bombs, and I'm going to set it only when on me to notify me when it's happening, because I'll see it on my party frames if other people have it. So only when on me, and then I'm going to make sure that the sound settings enabled. That should just be enabled by default. And then we go up to the sound tab, and then the sound that I personally use, because this is the sound that it default uses. I have my sound turned off. That's why I need to enable that again, because there was someone up here on their dragon riding mount, and their dragon was like screaming while I was getting ready to record. Okay, so we go back to Bigwigs. We go to Algeth'ar Academy, Vexamus, Mana Bombs, Sound, and this is the default sound that plays. If I hear that, it's not gonna. There's so many abilities where I hear that sound, so I always set it to basically whenever I feel like I need to use a debuff or a personal or not a debuff, when I need to use a personal cooldown or defensive on a debuff that's on me, I will always default to, I believe it is this sound. Let me make sure. Yes. So is it? Okay, it's this. The 183 is what I use. So whenever I hear that noise, I immediately press my defensive. Like, no questions asked. Whenever I hear that sound, I have told myself I press defensive. It works like that in Raid. It works like that in Mythic Plus. And that's what's important, is setting it up for consistency so that every single dungeon and every raid boss that I fight, when I hear that noise, I know exactly what to do. So that's why we go through and set this up, because hearing just the Bigwigs alarm sound, I'm not going to know to press my defensive. But hearing this sound, I have trained myself to press my defensive immediately when I hear this noise. So we're going to set it up like that. It is important, however, to make sure when you do this for debuffs, you always set it to only when on me. Otherwise, it will play that sound even when other players get the debuff, and that's not very useful because, I mean, it can be useful if you need it for that specific situation, but for the sake of we want to press our defensive, we wouldn't want to do that if the debuff isn't actually on us. So set it to win only a win on me. All right, so that's the dangerous debuff on ourself. Now, things to dispel, we have Oversurge to dispel, but that I don't really need a notification for that. It's easy to see it, and a lot of the time you don't even need to dispel it on people. So we're going to ignore that. And then maybe a countdown for this boss. So what could we set up to have a countdown to say, like, we want to hear a voice go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 before the ability happens. So something where we get a bit of a heads up before the ability happens. I would say that on this boss, I think Arcane Fissure would be the most useful because it's a little bit disruptive to what's going on because it knocks us back and then starts spawning swirlies under our feet. So I think setting up a countdown for this would be perfect. So we can just hit countdown, and then if we want to change the voice of the countdown, we can also do that. It's by default just the English Amy voice. I usually just leave it be. But sometimes if it's like, for instance, if it is something that I'm going to interrupt, like if say there's a boss that has an interrupt cast and it needs to be interrupted at all cost, then I will set it to like the Overwatch Diva voice, like for instance, so that whenever I hear Diva's voice, I go, oh, hey, I need to interrupt something in 5 seconds. But if I hear just the default voice, I'm like, okay, you know, this specific thing is happening that I've set it up for, or some kind of event is happening. But I set up certain voices to mean certain things, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's not too overwhelming. That's our first boss. I think that's all I'm going to set up for now. Don't really need to set up anything else. So we will go to Overgrown Ancient next. So Overgrown Ancient is a really intense healing boss, so this one's actually going to be pretty fun to set up. I think I have an idea of what I want to set up already. So first off, dangerous debuff on ourselves. There's nothing really here that does that. There's just a dangerous tank debuff, which we don't need to set. Like again, we don't want to set up the press defensive sound for when the tank gets a debuff, because then that's going to confuse us and it's not going to be consistent. We have to have everything be very, very consistent. So if we wanted to, we could set up like a specific sound for the, oh, hey, the tank has a debuff, so use an external. We could have a different sound for defensive versus external, but I'm not going to go that far into it. I can just see when the tank gets a dangerous debuff on him through my unit frames, so I just know to expect that and press my external on him. All right, so let's see. Things to dispel, that's the Lasher Toxin, but again, don't really need a notification for this. So what I will do is, I think Burst Forth is going to be the really important ability to set a countdown for, because it overlaps so awkwardly in this fight. So when this ability happens, it is going to deal a bunch of unavoidable group-wide damage, and it's also going to overlap on top of other abilities. It usually overlaps with like the Germinate happening and the branch out where he throws the tree on the ground and we all start taking bleed damage. It overlaps with all of that, so knowing ahead of time when exactly that unavoidable damage is going to happen is going to help a lot. And then I think besides that, I am pretty happy with the rest just being default, honestly. I don't need any specific sounds. I would say maybe the abundance for when the tree dies, just so that I know when it dies. So we could maybe set up something for that. Let's see. I think I have like a voice pack in here somewhere where they just say things. Is it this right here? Is this it?
Ads.
Yeah. So we could do like, we could have it say like clear.
Clear.
We could have it do that. I think I like that. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we'll just have it say clear every time that the tree dies. That way we just know to stand where the tree died and clear our debuff stack. And I'll have links in the description or the pinned comment. I usually drop them in both or one of the other. And I'll have links to these various, like how I'm getting these sounds, because obviously I'm using a lot of sounds that aren't in the game by default. So one is an add-on pack, and then the other one is also another separate add-on pack that comes with additional sounds that you can use, like the retro arcade sounds and stuff like that. Cool. So I'm happy with that for Overgrown Ancient. Let's go to Crawth next. So let's see. Crawth, I feel like we don't really need much. I would say the only thing is maybe the frontal. I think that's what I would want the countdown for, maybe. Let's see. It's either that or the deafening screech. I think I'm going to do the countdown for the knockback, which is like he faces a random direction and knocks everyone away. So knowing when that's going to happen ahead of time will be nice. And then the other thing is the deafening screech. We can enable a specific sound for that so that we know that he is going to interrupt us, which will be, we could have it say something. Let's see. Oh, we have a stack one. We could have done that. Maybe I'll change that for the tree later. Don't really like any of this stuff. You could have it say avoid, but okay, let's see. I think for this, I think we'll set it back to the default, which I believe it was. Oh, actually, I like using these, like the beware and destruction, so I think we'll do that. I think it's normally the raid warning. So I'll just set it back to the default for now. And then I think what I'm going to do is for this, I'll disable the countdown and we'll do the avoid sound for the knockback.
Avoid.
So whenever the knockback's happening, it will say avoid, and then we'll enable a countdown for the interrupt where we don't want to be casting, so that I just know, hey, you only have 5 seconds, and then you're going to have to stop casting. So, get ahead while this countdown timer is happening. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I think that's pretty much it for Crawth. I don't think he has too much else I would want to adjust. Again, you could set like a countdown timer or, some specific setting if you want tank, like to know when to external the tank and stuff. But I'm pretty happy with this. I just use the timer bars to see that. So now we'll go to the last boss, which is Echo of Doragosa. And for this one, don't need to worry about overwhelming power. Arcane Rift is the pool that drops on the floor. Don't really need to know that. We just see that visually. Astral Breath is a frontal, so we will go ahead and do the same thing again, consistency is very important. So now this is a random frontal. So we're going to just have it say avoid when it's going to happen. And then we have Power Vacuum, which is the ability where she sucks everybody into the middle of the room and then does a big AoE. So I think that would be the best for a countdown because, again, it's something that disrupts us. So I like using countdowns, at least the default countdown, for when something is going to disrupt my ability to just keep pressing my buttons. That way I know I only have 5 seconds before I am disrupted in some way. So setting a countdown for that. And then Energy Bomb is the one that marks a player. So again, for this, what we'll do is we will set it to only when on me. Again, we'll see it if it goes on other people. It's not going to remove the notification. It's just only going to play a sound when it's on us. That's what the only when on me does. We still get notifications for it. We still get the timer bar for it. We still see the debuff. It's just it won't make a noise unless it goes on us. Like it won't make a specific noise. So again, this one's going to be something that in higher keys we're going to want to press a defensive for. So I'm going to enable the 183 retro sound so that we know to press our defensive when we get that. Cool, and that is the last boss. So that is everything for that. So again, essential setup is dangerous for me personally. This is what I try to set up for myself. Dangerous debuff on myself, things to dispel, which there isn't really any, and then trying to find one important ability on each boss to set up a countdown for. And then we can also set up things for trash. So we go to the trash section here. And then if there's anything really, really important, we can set it up in here. Like there is Rift Breath. So we could, again, this is a random frontal. So let's go in here. And just for consistency, we go make it say avoid. And this is obviously a long process of setting all this up, but it is so worth it because it pays off, and this is going to last all season, and I have this set up just permanently, and it's going to help so much. We also have Expel Intruders. That's another random frontal, so we go in there, we set it to avoid, Making
Avoid.
all the random frontals a void. And then let's see what else we have. Don't need to see all this stuff. I'm not too worried about this. Astral Whirlwind, Astral Bomb. This is pretty important. This is going to be the only one on me, and then we set a... it's going to be the alert sound, I believe. And we set that to the retro sound. This is a debuff that it's like right before the last boss. It's these little mage or caster ads that will throw astral bombs on random players, and in higher keys, I think it's going to do significant damage. So right now, it's not really noticeable in M0s. Cool, and I think that is pretty much it as far as all of this. Mana Void is also... Is that... This is a debuff that goes on player. Infuses a target with Corrupted Void, inflicting damage. Cool, so this can be another one, only one on me. And then we'll set this to press a defensive, because that is going to be important in higher keys again, to just have our defensive pressed when this happens. So there we go. And I think that's it for Algeth'ar Academy. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to ask questions, drop recommendations, stuff like that in the comments. We'll have that be kind of like a discussion board for this dungeon in particular and the Bigwig setup. And then expect all the other dungeons to follow up. I'm going to try to get all these released before Mythic Plus actually releases this week. So hope you're enjoying Dragonflight as much as I am, and I'll see you guys in the next video.